Since I don't have a gavel, I'm doing what the sound man always says not to do, and that's pound on the microphone. So welcome to the Quality of Life Master Plan Review. And Mayor Ron is out of town, so I'm afraid you're stuck with me this evening, so I will do my best. So let's stand and do the flag salute first, and then we'll come down and start on our agenda items. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you, thank you. Wow, that's the best response I've had all day. So this evening we have a facilitator. We're down a facilitator as COVID continues. So first of all, we're going to be talking about the meeting objectives, which is to review project status and latest developments. We're going to review and discuss the draft QLMP, and I'm anxious to see that. And then we're going to review the remaining project schedule. So there you go. And thank you.
There we go. Thank you very much. Great to see you all here this evening. We're very pleased to be at this point in the process and would like to give you an update. It's been a couple months since we had our last meeting. We've been hard at work, and Matt is going to give you an update of some of the things that we've gone through and some additional community outreach activities that have occurred during the interim time.
Thanks, Doug. Good evening, everyone. So the last time we met was on April 14th, and we just wanted to give you a quick update as to what we've been up to. So on May 21st, we attended another event and did a pop-up for the QLMP. That event was Culture Fest. That was on May 21st. And I've always enjoyed doing these, interacting with the community. This one was especially nice. There were a lot of visitors, and I got a lot of the same feedback about the city in terms of great people, events, parks, safety, and the small town feel. And we got some good feedback on the mayor. You can say someone said the mayor is awesome.
Yeah, he wrote that one.
Yeah, he did.
And so I wrote one that said, all the mayors are awesome.
We were going to have a little more fun with that photo tonight, but we decided to keep it simple. We also tried to engage the younger demographic. So we did a youth and young adult survey, and then we held a roundtable event with the Youth Advisory Committee, and we want to thank TCSD for helping us pull that off. And that happened on June 1st. And Joey's actually going to provide some detail. Joey facilitated that roundtable discussion, and he's going to talk more about some of the findings, some of the feedback we received. And then we also worked on the vision statement. If you recall, last time we had a discussion about the vision statement. We all decided it needed some work. I did receive some email feedback from some of the Blue Ribbon Committee members, and some of the comments we got were focused on innovation, family, home and small town character, trying to incorporate that into the vision statement. And then we also tried to determine a foundation for the preparation of a vision statement. So we had some discussions about our city seal and what's in the city seal as far as old traditions and new opportunities. And then we have the council chambers, which are the Jeff Comachero council chambers, and he had a common phrasing. He used to say, you never regret doing things right. And I remember him saying, you never regret doing things right the first time. So we tried to incorporate that. And then finally, there's something called the Temecula Way, which has never been formalized, but as staff members, that's what we try to do, is do things the Temecula Way and go the extra mile to do things right. So that served as the basis for the vision statement, which was in the draft that was circulated to you. And I'd like to acknowledge Luke Watson. He wrote that, so we really hope you like it. But no, he did a good job. There were a lot of eyes on that. And then finally, in terms of document review, just a reminder that this is an update. It's not a brand-new document, but it's meant to be a broad-level visionary document. And what we tried to do in the update is balance the narrative, the graphics, the bullet points, and the data. And in terms of review, I'm just going to hold these up for visual effect. We had an admin draft QLMP review that was reviewed by planning staff only. And then we had a second review. And then we had an executive staff draft review, which I hand-delivered to exec staff. They took a look at it. And then we had a meeting with the City Council Subcommittee, got some of their feedback, and then we incorporated all of those comments into the working draft that was sent to the Blue Ribbon Committee. So I'd say we started out at maybe a 60-70% draft, and we'd like to think we're at about a 90% draft, and getting closer to 100, especially after tonight. And just a reminder tonight, please make sure your project, program, or area of interest has been incorporated. So you'll have an opportunity to give your feedback tonight, and then hopefully if you forget something tonight or leave something out, you can still send me an email, give me a call. We'll get your comments incorporated, and then so the date, July 28th, if you can get us your comments. Then there's going to be a city-owned vacant lands workshop. So that's going to be in the morning on August 2nd, and that's a city council workshop. The city has approximately 14, 15 pieces of property that are vacant, and part of the discussion will be what projects came out of the QLMP that could generally be considered for maybe some of those properties. So that'll be part of the discussion. And then potentially incorporated into the final document. And then there'll be a public review draft, which will be on the QLMP website. So members of the public can go there, they'll be able to comment. Those comments will be provided to staff, but they won't be made available for public view. They're going to be kind of behind the scenes, but provided to us. We'll incorporate as is appropriate, and then we're going to go back to all the commissions. So we'll be to Public Traffic Safety the end of August, and then Planning, Ready, and Community Services in September. And then our target date is to get back to the City Council September 27th. So that's our plan, and we're sticking to it. And again, just a reminder, if you get any questions or you need any information, you can always go back to the QLMP website. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joey. He's going to talk about the Youth Advisory Council Roundtable.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to facilitate the Youth Advisory Council meeting. It was a great group. We had about 25 kids, teens and young adults, ranging from 13 to 24 years old. And as Matt said, this was on June 1st. And so we had this meeting, and as Matt mentioned also, we had the dedicated youth survey that we pushed out and had some great responses on there that were kind of supplemental to this meeting. And what we had and kind of questions that we posed in this workshop. So one of the things that we talked about, we started off with a little bit of icebreaker. What's the coolest thing about living in Temecula? Tried to keep it young and hip to talk to all the kids about what they really like about living here in the city. And so a lot of them, these are just some common themes that were brought up. These weren't by any means all of the comments that were provided, but these were just some of the things. And so they brought up, the Old Town area, all the different activities and things to do. That was a very common reoccurring theme. A lot of those participants in that meeting really liked the opportunities that area provided to them. The walkability, connectivity, and the places to go across the city. A lot of those kids really talked about being able to walk to different places and get around the city pretty easily. And so that was a great thing to hear, and something that a lot of them really expressed, a lot of pride and stuff for their city, being able to get around easily. And so that also connected to the safe and close community feel, which was brought up a number of times. Those participants in the meeting there, they really talked about, how the walkability was bolstered by the fact that the community here is very safe and connected, and there's a close community feel. So, they don't really feel like they're at risk when they're going out walking to different places in the city. And so that was really good to hear. And that kind of then also goes into the plethora of parks and trails. That was a big topic of discussion. A lot of those participants in the meeting, they really enjoyed having those opportunities to get out, stay active, and just the proximity in the city to having that access to trails and access to open spaces and parks. And then diversity was also another thing that was brought up pretty regularly in the discussions too. A lot of those participants talked about, regardless of what sort of interests you have, what you feel, what you look like, they felt pretty welcomed and that they're represented pretty well in the city here. And so, that was great to hear from those kids. We had a great diverse, age range from 13 to 24, a lot of different interests, a lot of different participants there. So, to hear that from them was really great. And so there was a lot of discussion around that. And then finally, just the number of programs that were offered here in the city. I know a couple of them really brought up the leadership development opportunities, professional development. I know there was a financial literacy course that was offered that was brought up a couple times as something that they really enjoyed having access to in the city. So those were some of the cool things. And then the majority of the time that we really spent in the meeting was hearing from them, listening to their ideas, what they have to say about how the city could, maybe improve or do better to really represent them and make sure their ideas are captured in the QLMP document. And so I think the primary thing that we really heard was more options and opportunities, more programs for all teens and all young adults. They brought up a lot of the summer camp programs and the summer pamphlet. That was a nice place to have all those options in one place. But some of the older young adults, they that 20 to 24 range, and even after 18, they brought up kind of wanting more opportunities for finding internships, finding career pathways, leadership development opportunities. They kind of felt a little left out of some of the programs that were offered. A lot of them were geared more towards those younger teens and middle-aged teens. So, kind of having something for that 18 to 24 year range. Internship opportunities were something that was expressed a lot. Having a centralized place to really go and find all that information instead of having to dig around and kind of do hours of research just to find some different summer opportunities. That was a big point of discussion and ideas that were brought up pretty regularly. So, that was something that could maybe be improved upon, having that centralized location. Another one was just more mobility options, expanding transit. And what was brought up was actually a youth opportunity pass, so kind of having free ridership opportunities for teens and young adults across the city, and giving them that opportunity to really take advantage of the transit options. And one thing that was brought up pretty regularly was the stigma that is around taking public transit. And so a lot of people didn't really want to get on the bus just because the stigma around it, riding the bus, that's not as cool as maybe, riding with your friends in the car. But, a lot of them talked about the opportunities that the bus could provide and, the different access points that it really gets people to. And so, maybe breaking that stigma by providing more ridership opportunities for teens and young adults, maybe through a youth opportunity pass or something similar was a common point of discussion there. And then a great one to hear was more opportunities for engagement and outreach. They really enjoyed having the discussion there about the QLMP, and a lot of them, expressed interest in a follow-up meeting or continued engagement in this process. So, they provided a ton of really good feedback. I mean, it was a great group. There were some really bright kids out there. They had great ideas, and they were engaged and wanting to be continually engaged in this process. So, one of the things that they did bring up was having more opportunities for engagement like this, in a kind of dedicated for that youth group, for them to be in a space with their peers and talk about ideas that they have, and more opportunities for that, more opportunities for them to be engaged with on other planning efforts, not just, the QLMP document. And so another idea that they had was, meeting the students and young adults kind of in places where they're at instead of asking them to come to a meeting, going out to the schools or going out to camps or other areas where, they're already kind of centralized and located and gathering, and talking to them in that space instead of really having to bring them to a meeting and have them come somewhere to talk about these planning efforts. They wanted to have these opportunities across all sorts of different, activities that they're interested in. So, I think they mentioned getting up to the skate park and, really meeting some of the people where they're at who maybe wouldn't typically be involved in coming to a meeting that was called for the Youth Advisory Council. So, that was great to hear. They were very engaged in the process and really wanted more. So kind of increasing those opportunities was a big point of discussion. And then finally, an idea, and I think this is across more than just teens and young adults, but housing opportunities and affordability especially for them. They talked a lot about increasing density in areas, mixed-use areas, or hot spots, gathering places where people already are. There's a lot of amenities, a lot of services. And they talked about having, they don't need a big house or anything. They just want a place to live where they feel, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment, and, opportunities for them to be in places with services, with those amenities. So, they can get to those places without having to rely on a car, without driving across the city to get, their groceries, to go out to dinner, or, other amenities, go to the gym. And so, they talked about, being able to be in those areas and having more housing opportunities in those areas could also provide an opportunity to, reduce congestion, reduce the amount of traffic that's out on the roads, because people might be able to live in some of these areas where they're already connected to the amenities and services that they'd be going to otherwise. And so this was by no means, all the feedback that we got. There was a lot of really great conversations, and Andy was there to help facilitate with a great wall graphic too that we got, and I know we got some pictures there too. So I think it was a really great, we had about 25 kids, as I said, 13 to 24, so really great representation across, a bunch of different interests and a bunch of different teens out there. So it was great to see all of them come out, and I think they really wanted more opportunities for that in the future. So and I think those were the main kind of common themes. So I'll turn it back over to Doug here for kind of the.
So could we have does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask? Is that all the information you ever wanted to know? Go ahead, Gary.
I'd like to ask a question, and I know you brought it up at one point, but transit was mentioned a couple of times. So maybe Matt or Marianne, or I know Luke's here too, could help me with this, but what are the formulas that it takes to possibly reduce our region of transit to kind of move away from that large Riverside County regional transit system? And at what point can we add transit? What are those formulas?
That's a good question. I was on the RTA board for 10 years or so, and really RTA gauges their routes, the viable routes, by the request for them, number one, and the ridership that they will have on those routes. And so they can plan a route, even if it's going to lose money, but they still have to have a minimum number of riders. And when we first moved here, I know that the big car game that we played with the kids was how many people are on the bus, and the answer was always none. And sadly, that's true for the most part even now. So density will help that, but then the bus has to have a place to go. Where are you going to leave from the density, and where's it going to go? And we do have a couple of routes right now, for our students and going to the mall, coming to Old Town. It kind of makes a loop. But for the places you're talking about, getting on the bus, it's more than just the route. You have to have the stops, and it only helps if it's in the neighborhoods where people live. So there's a lot to it. That's why density is key in the transportation issue. You have to have a place where a bus can stop and fill up in one place, and we just don't have that yet. Now, Uptown Temecula is going to be geared that way. We will have that density in Uptown Temecula. So it's a matter of maintaining that good contact with RTA, and when we get requests for routes, we always forward those to RTA, and they keep track of who wants to go where. So density is the issue because everybody's in cars now, and we still have the park and ride for if you want to share if you're going to San Diego and back. So those will still be viable issues, and if we need to add park and rides, we can do that. Or get continued cooperation from the mall or some of the larger companies that can park cars during the day while they take the bus. But transit's always going to be an issue out here because we just don't have the density to support it. And as far as the passes go, the route, RTA routes that go to the colleges, Mount San Jacinto and some of the other colleges in the area, they ride, the students ride free. Also in the summer, we have, go to the beach and back for a quarter, if you're, I'm a kid, and that's been awesome. So grown-ups can't get that quarter. You still have to pay for the bus ride, but the kids can go. So I agree that transit is a goal. It is a goal, but the density's on its way. It's just not here yet. And I'm specifically talking about uptown.
Carl, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick thing, because the couple people I've talked to who are like in their early to late 20s, it's entertainment and also non-chain stuff. Because when you think Temecula, Marietta, you just think chain restaurants. And I don't know like what the city can do to try to encourage more of that stuff, but you compare that to a big city, which is where so many people who are professionals of that age are gravitating toward. If Temecula wants to get a slice of that, then I think that, I just don't know what there's certainly incentives the city could use, but it's just a thought.
We have so many restaurants that we tell builders that they don't have to include kitchens in their plans anymore. That's a joke, obviously, but there's so many, and there are lots of mom and pops. It's just a matter of, sniffing them out. And we have some great ones in Old Town and all along, everywhere. It's 79 South or Temecula Parkway corridor has quite a few, and it's a matter of, looking a little bit. No, that's good. I think the perspective of the young people is interesting. Not like us, they don't want big houses with yards like we did. And Yeah.
Any other questions on, we did, as Joey mentioned, also do a survey, so we got additional input that all pretty consistent with these major points that came out of the council discussion or the committee discussion. Okay. I wanted to mention, Andy's very sorry he wasn't able to be here tonight. This morning, his daughter tested positive for COVID, so he's at home with her, but wishes you all the best, and he'll be participating in our later presentations to the boards and commissions and so forth. So
Sadly, we're glad he's not here.
yes. They did just get back from a month in Europe, so it was kind of sorry to hear it, but at the same time, they had a great time while they were there. What we thought we would do tonight to facilitate the discussion is focus on a few key points in the document and kind of go through it as a group and try to get your comments, and then at the end kind of wrap up with any broader overall comments you might have. But wanted to go through briefly the vision statement. Matt kind of presented some of the background as to how that was developed, but make sure everyone is on board with where we've ended up there. Also go through the community projects timeline to make sure the major projects are represented there that need to be. And then we'll go through each of the core values and just focus on the goal statements and the indicators. And then again, at the end, we can pick up any additional overall comments or any other parts of the document that you may have edits or comments that you'd like to reflect. And I think we'll be able to get through it all. We may be able to take a break here. If someone feels like we're ready for a break, let me know. But otherwise, I'll kind of charge ahead. So let me just read this briefly. I know you've all had a chance to take a look at it, but the vision statement now reads, with a deep understanding of our history, the city of Temecula is a community and culture on the move. Residents are dedicated to family, community, economic prosperity, education, health, and peace, never regretting doing it right the first time and always pursuing the highest quality of life, something called the Temecula Way. And then when the subcommittee reviewed it, asked that we also try to incorporate maybe another sentence or two to get the concept of small town feel back in there. That's been in some of the prior drafts that we've looked at. And the idea of, Temecula is home, and so everyone should feel welcome at home. So those two ideas, we are going to try to edit into the statement as it stands, but be interested in any additional comments or things that you'd like to see
Carl, go
in
ahead.
it. Carl?
I think it's really good. So it's whoever, the people that put this together did a really good job. Two things. Never regretting doing it right the first time. That to me is kind of pointless. I know that was Jeff Comatero's mantra.
I recommended always doing things right the first time.
Well, but who doesn't want that? I think if you're going to say a statement, I think you want to avoid platitudes. So here's what I suggest. And this is trying to work in, if you can go back to the,
Just a moment, there we go.
yeah. So the first sentence is great. Instead of never regretting, blah, 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 it's just a thought again. Our priority is preserving our small town feel, or what do you want to call it, and always pursuing the highest quality of life, something called the Temecula way, period.
Okay, do we have reactions to that addition, or,
I brought up including the word safety.
okay?
I was ready to substitute safety with peace.
Okay,
Cool. You want to be cool. Peace is cool. That's what.
Well,
2040, you're
trying to be cool.
Speak to 2040, not 2008.
I had a comment, just from, I like the way it sounds, the way it is now, only because I work for a global brand, and one of there was like, only the best is good enough. And it also helped from the staffing perspective on the funding model, is people would use that as their decision-making, so that they weren't always taking the cheapest route. So I think it's better to keep it in there, because I think sometimes it's easier to take the cheaper route, but to have only the best is good enough, or the way we said it, the highest quality of life, I would just recommend keeping it in there for clarity.
Because it's intentional. It is
Yeah.
one thing, we intend to do it the best every time.
But I just think as an outsider, and you're aiming at the outsider, I see that and I go, ugh. It's pointless. It doesn't have any meaning. I'm just telling you as an outsider. And this is who you're trying, the first sentence is, you could almost stop there. I think ending with peace would be like, wow. But if you're going to have the second sentence, I just think never regretting doing the right first time. Who doesn't? That's like saying world peace. Throw that in there, too.
Sandy?
Never regret doing it right the first time is nice conceptually, but the subtext is because we didn't do it right the first time before.
Right.
And so it would, if I were an outsider, I'd go, wait, what? I'd read it again. So the concept is nice. There may be just another way to phrase it, and, I love Jeff, but nonetheless, there might be a better way.
It's always right, always doing things right the first time.
Let me suggest another context for this idea that comes up later, because we actually have struggled a bit with this in the accountable government core value, where the prior indicators or the way they were expressed had to do with cost effectiveness. So we're trying to keep the cost per capita of services as low as possible, but that runs up against the idea of having the highest quality of service for the residents, which really contributes to the quality of life that we're trying to achieve. And so in talking, for example, with the Human Resources Director, we had quite a conversation about, how do we balance these things? And so I think, Carl, to some extent, it's an external document, but I also see it as we had our conversations, particularly with the executive staff and other staff. It is really an internal document in many ways. It sets a standard for everyone who's associated with the city, that this is how we're going to operate. And I sort of feel that that's the sentiment that we're trying to get across. My initial reaction to this was it's kind of a negative way of expressing this.
That's what I
So
said
if we
during
could
our
turn it
discussion.
around to be more of the positive, then maybe that's kind of where we're trying to get to.
I said that exact same thing,
So-
don't approach from the negative.
Maybe just get rid of the never regretting
Yeah.
business.
Okay.
And simply
That's where I
say
was feeling, let's say.
something
All
like,
right.
our goal
Or
is to
striving
do it
to-
right the first time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Every, or something, but the never regret, just,
yeah.
right, okay.
I can live with peace.
Also,
Well, I think we can get safety and peace in there together. I'm sure that we can manage that.
Well, the only other, well, in terms of the number of new, family and community, economic prosperity, I love peace as well. I did seem like we missed out on either diversity or inclusion. Seemed like that really wasn't represented, but if I had initially thought throughout peace and put in diversity, but we all, I love peace. I'll keep it.
And yeah, on the last one, I agree with everyone. What I wrote is focused on doing it right the first time while always pursuing the highest quality of life.
Okay,
I thought that sounded a little better than the way it's written, so.
That's good.
that sounds real good. Can we make sure we get that written down?
Say that again, Eric.
Focused on doing it right the first time while always pursuing the highest quality of life.
Great. Let me,
Turn your
I think
microphone, Amy.
Darlene, did you have your hand
Amy.
up, and then we'll catch everybody? Oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
I like the fact that it's somewhat succinct, and I'm a little bit concerned about adding additional sentences for the things, and
Yeah.
I liked kind of what Carl's suggestion was to throw in that small town into the existing sentence rather than adding even more sentences.
Okay.
Because
I agree.
it no longer becomes a statement, it becomes, paragraphs.
Right.
And I think it might be an opportunity.
All right, I'm sorry.
This has been good feedback. I've taken a lot of notes. As far as safety goes, I think we had that conversation when we thought peace was a little more all-encompassing. Safety fell underneath that. And then, Eric, I wrote down your last sentence and some of these other notes. So we'll visit this again, and we'll run it past the subcommittee, and it will slightly change in the final document.
But I like, Eric, I like your change.
Lene, did you have an additional comment?
I did. Matt kind of poo-pooed it, but what I was going to say is I feel like peace is peace.
Ethereal.
Like world peace, and I just feel like safety is what we're about in the city. So I would like to see safety rather than peace.
Yeah, I mean, I think the group did a really good job at writing this. And I know each of us look at it within our own lens, so I'm on the other side. My first comment is this. I really like the idea of saying always pursuing the highest quality of life, maybe for all, because that's for all diversity, for all, special needs, that for all is all of us, right? It's not just one group. I think peace is more all-encompassing. I think safety becomes a little more focused. But, so forgive me, I didn't mean to speak right after you. So however you guys figure it out, but thank you.
The vision statement is proving to be as challenging as the rest of the document.
It always is, I think. Yeah.
Great, well, these were all very helpful comments.
Yeah, I
Those
think
appreciate.
we're there,
Okay,
very close.
great. All right, very good then. We'll move on to the timeline. The last time you looked at this, it was organized by topic, so to speak, but now we've actually put it in more of a timeline frame. So I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. Hopefully they're in front of you. We got them divided onto about 4 slides here to cover the whole time frame, but I'll just go through them quickly, and then we can see if there's any that you feel are really missing. So we have the comprehensive community policing strategy. We have, this is all in the 2022 to 2030 timeframe, so the relatively short timeframe. Inez Road widening, broadband master plan, which is underway, expanding the asset management system, which already exists, develop an integrated data, that should be data dashboards, so that would be on the website, having data. So not to digress, but all the QLMP indicators are going to be developed into a dashboard that will be accessible through the website, and it will also permit staff to update them more regularly. So there'll be roughly annual or maybe biannual updates as opposed to every 10 years as so that's just a technology improvement that the city is undergoing. We also have French Valley, Parkway, a couple phases. There are 2 fire stations that are planned to be renovated with various facilities added. A stormwater master plan, the overland bridge widening, of course, the general plan update with a focus on resiliency, the Career Technical Education Center that we talked about quite a bit last time, implementing smart city technology. We have I-5 improvements, or I-15 improvements, auxiliary lanes in both directions, fiber optic connections throughout to help implement the smart city program. Complete the Temecula Loop Trail. There are actually a number of segments of trail that encompasses, but eventually we'll go around the entire city. Establishing a regional transportation task force to deal with regional commute issues. Nicholas Road extension, mobile library resource vans as opposed to an additional concrete library. Wineries, Old Town Hotel, transit line, park and ride. So we were just talking about transit. This would be more tourism oriented. The CRC renovation, which would include an upgrade to the teen room. The emergency management master plan, which also includes several sub-elements, expanding city Wi-Fi to additional public spaces. The climate action plan, which would be part of the general plan update, including greenways infrastructure, master drainage study, trails and bikeways, and urban forest management plan, some of which already exist, and organic community garden. Then in the longer time frame, we have renovate the Margarita Recreation Center, a new tennis complex, an integrated watershed management plan, construction of a transit center, additional French Valley Parkway improvements, construction of a hotel. Did we get those 2 things mixed together? We might have. We'll have to double check that. Second senior center for active adults. Ultimately building a headquarters for the fire department, replacing the existing Station 12. I-15 Gateway Monument, Old Town parking structures, a performing arts center, mountain lion crossing over or under I-15. And then finally, Murrieta Creek Bridge at Cherry connecting French Valley Parkway, the Temecula Valley Hospital expansion, complete implementation of Old Town specific plans. So that includes a lot of private sector activities as well as public sector, as does the hospital, and Pachanga for that matter at the end of the list here. An aquatic facility with an Olympic pool, a fire training facility with a tower, so that's yet an additional improvement for the fire department besides the other 2 stations. Freeway landscape beautification, which kind of goes along with the monument project. A Southside Recreation Center, implementing the Uptown Temecula specific plan along Jefferson, a Western Bypass corridor, and a DS Road widening. And I mentioned the Pachanga Resort. So those are all the items that are currently on the list. And again, this went through fairly extensive review with the executive management staff at the city. You may have noticed each of the core value chapters also has a list of what we call strategic priorities. So there are some additional projects that don't rise to the level of maybe being put on this timeline, but are also important projects that the city has on its radar to help implement some of those core values. So there's kind of 2 levels of projects, and we're hoping to keep this level at kind of the highest level for the timeline, and then the other priorities we've put on those other lists. So I'm going to open this up now to any input that you might have on additional project. And I'll start over here so I don't lose track.
So I know that we've already voted on this, the pickleball sports complex. So I don't know, is that not raised to that level to put on it on this timeline? Because we have tennis, new tennis complex, we have aquatics, but I don't see pickleball. And that's already been voted on and is in the process, so I just
Yeah.
wondered.
Yeah, so there's been some recent improvements made, but if there's additional requirements for pickleball or additional requests for pickleball, we can add that to, with tennis courts, with the Olympic pool. We can do that.
No, that's not what I mean.
Well,
I mean, we're talking about the first 20-year, or 2022 to 2030, correct? And that's already in that plan for those, in that timeline, but it's not on here. I'm just asking, is that because of the level of whatever
Can I
project?
give it a shot? Can I give it a shot real quick?
Go ahead.
So you're talking about the pickleball complex.
Uh-huh.
So that's already in the CIP. It's already
So
funded.
it doesn't,
So
so it
it's
doesn't go on.
already kind of in the present.
Okay.
It's already
Okay.
funded in the CIP in
Okay,
the
that was
present.
my
So
question.
it's now. This is all. the
It's a
stuff
matter
that's
of finding a
coming.
Okay,
place.
all right. Got it. Thanks.
Thank you, Luke.
In the future, you mentioned Pachanga. Not, we can't say Pachanga. We have to say Pachanga if we can.
Sorry.
And, sorry, just, it was, my grandmother made me do it. And again and again. But I'm a little curious of why it's in 2040, and if Pachanga was actually consulted, or if that maybe isn't needed to be in 2040? Is it kind of just as the resort grows? Or why is it?
Yeah,
there?
it was, we don't have specific information from them on what projects they may have over, so it was, and again, since it's the only project there, I agree that that slide says 2040, then maybe that little heading isn't necessary. It's just that it's undefined, and there may be things that extend beyond that 2040 that.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure. We think that might have been actually a carryover from before they did
previous
the
one.
expansion.
Okay, yeah.
To be honest,
and-
from our
yeah.
last go-round, we think,
Yeah.
because we looked at that, when we got this last draft, we said, wait a minute, 2040 long-term
Yeah.
plans, we don't know what that even means. So we actually think that might have been a mistake that it's even in there.
And
So-
right now, we know of the expansion of the property that's on Pachanga Parkway across, across the street. So, but that,
Yeah, it's not like, I mean, that original Kelsey track is always going to stay the Kelsey track. So
Right.
as far as like the resort is concerned, it's staying where it is. So I don't know. I mean, I know Jacob's included on the QLMP. I messed that up. So we might just want to extend, I can ask him about it, just make sure, and I'll get you guys feedback. I just kind of think even if we just take off the 2040 and beyond and just put Pachanga Resort long-term development, because, we might have something in there at some point, but not have a date, because it'll be.
and
a
we're
little
committed to
bit-
always working with Pachanga
Yeah.
anytime there's a change.
Yeah, and we don't have anything
Yeah, I
big.
think so, too.
That would be great
Thank
if
you.
you could
No worries.
follow up.
I know it carries over. I'll follow up with Jacob.
That would be
And I'll
great.
get back
Thank
to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. David?
Yeah, a couple of comments. First, a more focused one. I think the mobile library resource vans is a really cool concept. I would hope that that's not a replacement for the South Side Library project that was in the current plan. I think it's important to have a fixture or a place that kids can go for story time or to access a computer lab, a place that students can walk to after school to have a place to study. These are kinds of community development that can really only happen at a permanent library. And I'm not just advocating for this as a Southside resident. This was identified as a service gap in the Community Services Master Plan. And I would challenge us to fill that gap the Temecula way, see if we can't outdo ourselves and build the best library yet. And then my second comment, as I'm thinking about, what's the best strategy for the city as a whole, I'm looking at the areas that have the most need for projects currently and also the areas that have the most potential for future redevelopment. How we can choose our projects or prioritize them in a way that honors our equity core value, but also maximizes the economic return on investment. And with those goals in mind, I would say we should try to prioritize projects west of I-15, specifically the Detention Basin Sports Park, the Jefferson Community Center renovation or relocation, better connections at either end of the Murrieta Creek Regional Trail, and then circulation projects across Murrieta Creek at Overland Drive and Cherry Street. So to the extent that those are projects where we can control the timing, I know some of it depends on funding sources and partnerships with other jurisdictions, but to the extent that we can, I think we should prioritize those.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Tammy, I guess for this, it might be easier to go around, but I'm not seeing any hands, so Juan Carlos?
Yeah, I was curious if I'm not sure if I missed it. Cherry Street, the connector to Diaz on the back and around, there's supposed to be some private land issues or something, I don't remember, but there was a thought at one point to connect Cherry all the way to Diaz, and is that part of any of these existing?
Well, you can see right there the Western Bypass Corridor. That is encompassing all of that. So that would start at Temecula Parkway, all the way at the south, include a bridge, include the road going around the new Altera development, connecting with Diaz, going all the way up Diaz to Cherry, connecting from Cherry over the creek, and then connecting into French Valley Parkway. So that's what in its entirety, that's what the Western Bypass Corridor means.
That answered everything, because I was next going to ask, but thank you.
Great. Gary?
Wanted a clarification on what you said at the beginning. So the section 2030 to 2040 is more of really the 20-year programs that you didn't really want to, that were they actually from 2030 to 2040, or are we saying that because we do things the Temecula way, those things would be pushed up in the timeline? Or is this a pretty good estimate here?
Maybe near term and midterm is a better way
Yeah.
to describe it. The timelines are a guide,
Okay.
but if you think about it in that context, kind of near term and midterm, those are the more midterm projects.
Okay.
I think it's
planning.
really up to this
Yeah.
this group, you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
Altering where projects fall on that timeline is really what you guys are here to talk
Yeah.
about.
Okay, so that said,
Yeah.
let's get that western bypass and put it way over here to the left. But no, I did just see, like that said, it doesn't have to be in chronological order, but you had complete the Temecula loop, and then you had Nicholas Road extension coming after that. Just for a visual, you might want to do it the other way. Although I am going to talk about later in terms of active transportation, pop-up programs that are quick start programs that we can do. And there are potential, even if you didn't have the Nicholas extension done, you could connect the loop with other options with some quick start programs. But that was the only thing I had on it. Thanks.
Okay.
Good point.
Darlene?
The hospital expansion is several phases, and there will be phases in the first section of this. So I wasn't sure if it was
Okay.
because all the phases won't be done,
Yeah.
or why it was pushed off to later.
It was, I think, to the extent that we didn't have information, we're thinking when would everything be completed? So whether it would all the phases be completed by 2030 or not, and if so, we can certainly move it on the timeline.
Yeah.
So it's rather than obligating you to be finished next week, we've opted to push it out a
Certainly
little.
hope to have quite a bit done by 2030.
And I think it's the same as Pechanga. We know that the hospital's continuously going to be upgrading, developing, or reconfiguring. So, we're here for you.
And if I could just add real quick to that, I know that it has like a timeline feel to it, but I can tell you in the current Quality Life Master Plan, it's really not practically used that way. It's like this is the universe of projects
Right.
that the city has said that they want to do in this time frame. And there was never a debate about This one comes before that one
Right.
on the timeline.
It's an ideal
And we don't
list,
use, we don't
really.
practically use it that way, so I'm not sure there's a huge utility in, making sure it lands perfectly where you think it should on the timeline.
But
Let me go around and we'll come back. Kathy?
Thank you. I understand what you're saying, near term and far term. Is there a better way we could present this perhaps? Because I look at this and I see the aquatics facility with an Olympic pool being in the 2030, 2040 bracket. And we're like talking about that now. Residents are coming in and asking for that now. And so seeing it over here at this other end, it doesn't feel like we're answering the need of the residents that they're asking for now. And also seeing over here the implementation of the Uptown Temecula is in that 20, implement the Uptown Temecula specific plan 2030 to 2040. We need to work on that redevelopment now because we need that area to start getting in some of our attainable housing and some different options that the younger adults are asking for now.
Yeah, and maybe that should say complete implementation of the uptown
Yeah.
specific plans. That's going to take many years to build out,
Yes.
especially with the density that's identified.
Completely
This-
be better, because I see implement, and I'm like, what, you're not going to start till 2030?
Yeah, I think it should be
That's too
complete
late.
implementation.
Okay.
I think graphically, the original plan had icons associated with each of the different projects. We're going to do that, and I think we can take a look at the 2022 to 2030 versus the 2030 to 2040, and there may be a different way to present this so that it's kind of over the 20-year planning period without it being so specific. We're gonna work on that.
The
Some
original
good input.
plan did include the word complete X project a number of times in the timeline. We didn't do that here because in a sense, they're all that way. We're starting all of them. They're all things that we know about today. And so in that sense, the planning for virtually all of these things is underway at some level. But when can they be completed? And just, the aquatics facility, the last conversation we had was, where the funding would come from, and that could take a while to pull together. So that's just the consideration. But this is the one thing graphically that we're working the most on still to try to find the best way to present it. So let's go around again. Were there any other comments? Or Carl, do you have a comment?
Just real quick, because I noticed wineries is kind of like thrown in to 2022, 2030. And it's just like we got to jam it in somewhere. And to me, like the Pachanga thing, I think it's wonderful, but it's like, it has its own little because when you think of tourism in Temecula, you think of Pachanga and you think of the wineries. Well, I see Pachanga prominently, but I don't see the wineries. Does that make sense?
The wineries, that reference is specifically related to the transit line. Is
Then
that-
I think wineries need, if we're going to have Pachanga long-term development, what about wineries long-term development? Because that's.
So
when you
just
think
as a
of
broad tourism, economic development element.
But I'm just saying it should be mentioned, that's all I'm saying. And then the other thing was, and this goes back like 30 years, when Zeb Buppin was around and he was proposing this massive thing in Old Town, and obviously it didn't happen. But there was a lot of talk, like, well, if we're going to do that, or Zeb was trying to weave this into, it was like, well, make it a river walk, like San Antonio. And
I can tell
see-
you right now that Riverside County Flood Control has put the big nix on that one.
But what I'm thinking, no, I get it. No, but what I'm thinking is you could make it as beautiful as possible, and then you could have restaurants on both sides, and then you could look, you could sit outside and you see this like, wow,
Actually,
and then you have like, these walking trails and.
Uptown
people
Temecula
walking
is
by.
built that way, with the houses right on the creek view. And actually, those are going to be taller buildings on that side, so they can be multi-use.
But I'm thinking Old Town specifically.
Oh, Old Town.
See what I'm saying? Because right now, there's not much. You could sit in a restaurant and look out on the creek. Is there
Excuse me.
anything?
The Old Town specific plan does have that component in it. So we've tried to activate Front Street, but then within the specific plan, there's also a requirement to activate what would be referred to as the backside along the creek.
Right.
That's just been a work in progress because it was taking so long for the flood control
Sure.
channel improvements, but those have been done, and I think with the activation of the creek walk and that opportunity, we're gonna see more of that. So that is identified in the plan.
But Riverwalk where water is contained, yeah, we'd love to do that, but, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'm sorry, Kim.
I was just going to add too, I think because when you look at a timeline, that's where for like, I think, control of communication within our community, just like Kathy said, I think it's important anytime we have like a tool like this that we could have a key to it. So what, the definition of this is going to happen over time because you're going to people are going to take this piece and it's going to be out of context. And so to know that it's going to take 15 years to get something done. I'm not sure if you can say if it's capital or funding or how some other key code, as you said in your graphic, about what these really mean. Because some of them are very, long way out, and it's going to cause confusion.
Yeah, I think there was a key in the original plan, and I think we need to go back to that because not all of these are controlled solely by the city.
Right.
Some of them are public-private partnerships, some of them are completely private.
Right.
So yeah, I agree.
So saying that, I think, because that's the transparent part where people will misinterpret, and then we'll be talking about the same things over and over about when is the creek walk going to be finished, and it's ongoing, it's in the plan, it's, enhancements or the beautification, because our interest for tourism is branding and beautification, to know it's going to be 2030, but as Darlene said, the process is, the funding is in process. It may take several years to get the process. We've started phase 1 with Pechanga funded phase 1, and now we're working on phase 2 and 3. So how can we articulate that? And I know this is high level.
No, it's a very good point because some of them, it's Caltrans, it's federal funding. Some of it's Army Corps federal funding. Point is well taken, and I think we'll work on that.
Okay, and then I just had one more question. On the one that does talk about the winery, hotel, and transit, did that come out of a workshop or, I know we worked with RTA years ago about funding that, but I think there was still pushback from the private sector on.
I think this is from the last QLMP, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So it's a holdover of an idea that's been around
Okay.
for a while.
Thank you.
Yes, Amy?
Sorry, just one, real quick, on the Career and Technical Career Center, our educational center it seems, the way it's worded, it seems to talk more about the high school students, starting them in CTE, and I was wondering if it also meant vocational work for more of those technical jobs that we had been talking about, or I didn't know if we could add vocational. It says connection to MSJC, but like my kid's a freshman, she's already at MSJC. So we want them to keep going.
There's I think it's mentioned a couple different places in the document. One of the places, it talks about a whole continuum from high school to MSJC to CSU San Marcos.
Okay.
And the MSJC part would be the vocational education part, along with part of the high school.
And it articulates with the high school courses that was my job at the district. So it articulates with the high school courses, so you can move straight from CTE on the final, the final class of that and move straight into MSJC in the same program. And it's really quite seamless. And the district works really closely with them. And then beyond that, MSJC works with the four-year universities to try and streamline that same process at that level.
Oh, I got you. I think, I like what it says. I just think if we could add like the word vocational there, or,
Okay.
and also, I think one other little piece, I know we have different time zones and different times, and we're going to talk about that, but there are a lot of youth right now that are going to need that housing like in 10 years. And they're going to need that education in 10 years when they all get done working at, biology and McDonald's, and they want a living wage, and they want to move out of their parents' house eventually. So I just kind of feel like if we could move up that uptown to near-term planning instead of saying when it's completed.
Okay.
Because for me, as a planner, it's one thing to say it's going to be built out, but they still don't really know what it's going to look like. So if we're serious about affordable housing for the young community, as well as for the special needs community, and having it being a living, working community in uptown Temecula, I kind of would prefer us not say fully built out in 2040, just start talking about, because it's here. It sounds like it's here. I know it can't all be completed just by moving the date. If I just move the little bullet point, and it'll just happen, I'm sure. But if we can kind of refocus that, because I think that's going to be a huge strength that Temecula is in the future.
I agree with
Okay.
you. And if you think of the way that Old Town evolved, it's kind of a natural evolution. And so we recruit and cheerlead and promote as much as we can to get people to come in and be, and it's usually the first one. After the first one, then it gets a lot easier. So, but it'll be very similar to what's happened to Old Town in over 20 years, 25, 30 years.
I'd like to move the discussion on, if I could. As Matt said, what we'd like you to all do is send us emails with additional comments if you have other things that we don't cover in the discussion tonight, if that's okay with, I'll go ahead if it's something.
Up to this point, we've been talking about a 20-year plan for all of our meetings, and now we've switched into an 8-year plan and a 20-year plan. And the rest of the document, it all addresses a 20-year plan. So was this a carryover thought that we would split things into 8-year versus 20-year?
No, the intention, the original one also had kind of a midpoint to the 20 years, and in this case, we drew the midpoint at the decade as opposed to 2032, but it's really just the same intent of trying to just divide it a little bit, because 20 years is a long time. But again, we're going to try to work on a different graphical way of presenting that.
I'd like to add, as far as the comments go too, you can send an email, but if you're more comfortable marking up the document and you want to drop off red lines, I'd be happy to incorporate those as well. So that's an option.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to the core values. As you may have noticed in one of the early chapters, we've developed new icons for all the core values, so those carry through the document, and trying to present the idea they all contribute to the quality of life in different ways. So what I'll do is just read really quickly through the goals and then go through the indicators to highlight changes from the old document to the new one, based mostly on your feedback at prior meetings, and then we'll stop and discuss each core value and then move on to the next one. Wouldn't I?
Can you just go back to that previous slide? So my eye goes to, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like I would think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't know if that matters.
Well,
But
it's
to
interesting
me-
you say that, because our original design was actually a pyramid, which had them kind of stacked in the order that
But I
you just
just mean it
described. But then
doesn't-
we kind of felt that we didn't
I like the
necessarily.
circle. I like the circle.
Yeah, we
I'm
didn't
just
necessarily
saying-
want to assign priority in that way. But
Okay, so you want all 7 to be equal, is what
yes,
you're saying?
I think that was the sort of ending consensus. We went through a number of iterations, but that's where we landed.
Okay, all right.
Okay, safe and prepared community. Most of these goals are carryover from prior, so continue to be one of the safest cities in California. Ensure that funding for public safety remains a high priority. The ratio of 1 police officer per 1,000 continues. Support community-oriented policing and maximize community leadership in public safety. The ISO rating of 1.0. 5-minute or less response time, particularly for fire protection. Minimize impact of property and the environment from natural hazards and emergency situations by maintaining a high level of emergency management planning facilities and technology, including coordination with regional partners. There's a little bit more focus there on emergency management planning than we previously had, so that's a new element. Providing recreational and other activities for children and youth that promote socially productive behavior. Effective enforcement of city zoning, building, fire, and grading codes, and continue to provide a high level of public information and training for the community surrounding emergency management. And you'll see as we go through the indicators, we've added a lot of indicators on that point in particular. So again, a lot of these initial ones are the same indicators that we've been tracking. So officers per 1,000, the response times for both police and fire, the ranking in terms of safety and compared to other cities, the trends in crime. I will say, although the violent crimes increased, they didn't increase by much. In talking with the police department, they point to the very quick response and the 100% resolution rate. So for all the crimes that did occur, they were able to apprehend a suspect or get to a conclusion on virtually all of those. So we didn't include that as an indicator, but in their sense, the trend is maybe not as dire as it looks. Response times, again, in the fire insurance rating. What I wanted to focus on is the lower part of this table, which are the indicators around training citizens in, first of all, CPR and first aid and that sort of thing. The city is doing that already. In the last year, they trained 633 people. So that they have a goal. The city actually has a goal of training 850 people a year, so they're working toward that. So that's an established mechanism within the fire and emergency management program. Similarly, we have this, the CERT program where citizens are trained more extensively in emergency response and create teams. Again, that's an ongoing effort that they did 139. All of this has been affected by the pandemic, so the goals are higher and the ability to actually get people and reach out to people will improve as, things open up even more. New enrollees in the mass notification system. So there are approximately 3,000 households currently enrolled, and that obviously there was 110,000 people in the city, so that's an ongoing goal to boost that and to really get everybody enrolled over a reasonable period of time. We need to about double the rate at which that's happened so far. And then finally, developing partnerships with community stakeholders, which are mainly organizations. I believe the City Council has a goal and has, in fact, established 7 different partnerships currently. Certainly there are more that can be done, but that's kind of where things are with that currently. So those are the emergency management ones. This traffic safety, again, is something that comes from the California Office of Traffic Safety, and then the graffiti removal is something that the city tracks regularly. So those are all the indicators for safe and prepared community and the goals. So I'll stop there. And are there any additions, wording changes, or questions about the indicators on that core value? David.
Yeah, so I think this section starts off really strong with a good summary of the broken windows theory of crime, emphasis on reality and perception. That's all good. Also captures how public safety is evolving in Temecula with community policing, Old Town Metro Team, CBAT, homeless outreach.
Flock system.
Yeah. And I think if you read between the lines there, what it's really getting at is a proactive root cause approach to public safety as well. But our staffing metric doesn't really match that approach, I think. In fairness, we've gotten some utility out of the per capita staffing, 1 officer per 1,000 residents. And there's some comfort in having that there as a sort of backstop. But, it doesn't scale with occupancy, doesn't really fully support the community policing approach. And what I would suggest as a replacement for that would be to determine staffing based on workload. And we have to be a little nuanced in how we define that. We don't, I think, just want the minimum number of officers required to answer calls for service. That would be purely reactive. But instead, if we had some kind of indicator that says, we want officers spending maybe 50% of their time responding to all the calls, for service, and then having 50% of their time left over to proactively patrol, engage with the community, choose other, self-directed activities, then the appropriate staffing level would follow from that. So that would be my suggestion, and also to maybe tweak the wording of those opening paragraphs just a little to make it very clear that we aren't just about solving the traditional broken windows, proximate causes of crime, but that we are committed to solving to root. And that's how we, I think, go from 16th safest city in the nation to first.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. I think those are very interesting observations. I want to mention one thing that's not captured here, but is part of the strategic priorities, is the quality of life policing team that the city is working on developing that concept. And from hearing it described from the police folks, it sounds very much like what you're getting at, which is a much more sort of comprehensive and holistic view of how to, so that isn't captured in the quantitative metrics yet, because I think the city is still working out how that would be implemented.
I think what we have to do is craft this, but still give the city the flexibility to move the officers around where we need them, because we know it changes constantly.
Okay.
But I understand what you're saying, and I think that kind of does, I wouldn't want to hamstring them to 50% here or 50% there, because, that could change on a daily basis. But as long as we have the sufficient number that we can move them around, you saw how quickly we got 9 officers in Old Town within a couple of days. We just moved people around. So that really does give us the most flexibility to respond in the way that, is dictated by the times, I guess.
Okay, great. Juan Carlos?
Just a quick question. Do we keep track of number of volunteers that participate in sort of community policing groups and organizations? Do we, going to the point of talking about how much we are dedicated to our own safety, is if we are promoting the number of overall volunteers that are part of these kinds of organizations, if we identify them, or if there's a certain number, as that number grows, it certainly seems like we are invested in our own safety.
Yeah, and we absolutely are, because they receive training and supplies, and they meet regularly, and they're very well organized now. We have new leadership organized, so we know the certs, exactly, what they are and what their duties are and how much equipment each one of them has in the neighborhoods. We also know which neighborhoods are part of Neighborhood Watch, and that is hugely effective if you can get a really good neighborhood watch, even if it's just by block, like your own street or your own block. And so we know who those are.
I'd love to see incorporated. Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other comments on this, Gary?
Yeah, just one, that we do have a really well-written indicator by the state on overall traffic safety, but we don't really have a specific goal for that. There is a goal written into the indicator, but I'm saying that maybe in our goals, we should not ignore traffic, because we don't mention traffic again in the accomplishments or in the final objectives. I've made the comment before that, one of the things that's just amazing to me is that all of the speed limit changes we've made in our city and over the last 18 months is the speed limit has gone down. So, something that could be celebrated in accomplishments, but to focus on traffic somewhere on the goals and objectives.
Okay, we'll take a look at that then.
Gary, you mean like numbers of accidents broken down by the type of accident and that kind of thing?
No, I wouldn't talk about number of crashes, which is the problem, but I would say to have a specific goal, when we list our goals at the beginning, the goal in there is very well, to rank in the top 10 cities. Progressing is in the top 11 to 20. Needs improvement is a 20-plus city rankings, something like that, to write that up as a goal. We have it in the indicators, but
Oh, I see
it's
what you're
not
saying.
mentioned in the goals. We don't mention anything in the accomplishments or in the objectives. So I would just say, whereas, fire, police, and all of the, and preparedness, they're mentioned throughout the whole section. So just to say, let's not say it here and then ignore it in the other sections.
Okay.
Okay,
Got it.
great. David?
Yeah, just to add to what you're saying, Gary, we did recently pass a local road safety plan for the city that analyzes all the different kinds of accidents, vehicle, bicycle, pedestrian, motorcycle. And that plan does have the goal of, being a Vision Zero plan to reduce all those accidents to zero. So I think we could use that as a source for
That's a good idea.
the QLMP here.
Okay. Our next core value is transportation, so without objection, maybe I'll move on to that. Oh, Lanai?
Just really simple, but in that first page, I think we should highlight Old Town Metro Team, Code Enforcement, and Homeless Outreach Team, because those are three,
Okay,
as far as from a planning perspective, those are three that we have really worked on so just underlining them or bold them or something so they pop out. And then I just had a question on the indicator with graffiti. Like, I don't understand why we're down. I thought that we were like really good with graffiti.
We are really good.
historically has been, but it was a drop-off, and I don't know if it's
Oh.
pandemic-related or what, but it just, the latest data fell below where the city
Okay.
historically has been.
Huh.
So it's hopefully something
don't
that
know.
can pop back up again quickly.
I just had a quick question. It would be probably for all of them. Is there a way to highlight which indicators new from the previous plan? Because I know we talked about, is there a way to identify that, or at least for us to know which ones are newer that we've added? Because I think we talked about that as things have changed and the industries have changed and cities are changing.
I'm trying to highlight it as I go through verbally, but we could, there's a way it could be done in the document.
So in
but-
this, so for the safety and preparedness, is there any new additions from, or just language change?
All the things around emergency preparedness, this
all new.
core value mentioned it, but had virtually no indicators
Okay.
to measure anything, and so almost all of that is all new
Okay.
material this time
Thank
around.
you.
Yeah.
Kimberly, you talking about for comparison purposes from previous to now? Yeah.
I mean, if that's preferred, we could put that in the new document. There could be a subheading for new indicators for the update.
I kind of like that.
Or they could be color-coded, that would be another way
Yeah.
to do it, so we could certainly do that.
We'll explore that idea.
Yeah, I like that.
I think it just shows that we're being progressive, we're not status quo. I think that's
Absolutely.
that you're progressing.
Okay, very good.
I have just one thing, and I'll be quick.
Sure.
I think a huge part of this, our safe environment, is that neighborhood watch program. An extension of our law enforcement officers. I think it should be called out, and it is a way to measure it based on communities that get engaged in that process over the course of the year. So
Okay.
I think it should be pulled out because I think it's critical to, if we're going to maintain that high ranking, our citizens needs to be engaged. And I think pulling out the neighborhood watch program and expanding on that, again, law enforcement to really engage in that space to try to expand it in our city, I think that's critical to us to continue to be a safe city. So thanks.
It really does make a difference. I mean, and it is measurable.
Great, we'll get the data on that and create an indicator. Very good. Okay, transportation, mobility, and connectivity. Most of these are the same as we had. They're in a little different order before, but The level of service D, the idea of matching job growth with housing to reduce out commuting, completing the transportation network completely. These are all things that will be handled also in the general plan circulation element. There's a little more focus now on the trail system, so there's closing all gaps to establish a connected pedestrian, bicycle, and equestrian transportation system. In the community workshops we held, a number of people came and talked about needing the equestrian trails to also get them where they're going, as well as bike and pedestrian. So coordinating land use and transportation, increasing mobility options, developing a complete streets policy, which again will be part of the circulation element, and adding facilities for electric vehicles and other kinds of transportation modes. So in the indicators, this central section, bike trails, pathways, and walkability, we've added several elements. First of all, there's been a lot of progress in the miles of trail system that the city's completed. Still not quite fully developed, but the new Bikeways and Trails Master Plan has a plan for that. But we've also added the idea of trying to achieve a certain level of bicycle friendliness, and there are organizations out there that measure that. Currently, the city is at a bronze level, but we could get to as high as platinum. So 2 of these indicators address that opportunity. And then at the bottom, we have the same transit ridership indicators that we had previously. So those are the transportation and mobility indicators and the goals. Any comments or input?
Does everybody know what level D means?
I do, but.
Yeah, and David does.
Yes.
So it's actually, the service level is actually the amount of time that cars have to wait at an intersection. You know, if it's more than one cycle or whatever, so it's a percentage of time that they have to spend at an intersection. And believe it or not, that you strive for level D is the goal. Because, for example, we could make the intersection of Rancho California and Inez level A very easily if we bulldozed all the buildings around it and made the road 36 lanes wide in each direction. That would achieve a level A, but the rest of the time it's going to look like Tiananmen Square. So, and those are for peaks. So we measure at peak periods for traffic. And so you have to strike a balance between, you know, everything. You know, how much property do you want to sacrifice or overtake? You know, what's the aesthetics of the roadway and how long the cars have to wait? So that's what level D is.
Very good.
Yeah, I might as well talk about the indicators that you added. I'm not seeing it up there, but you mentioned the platinum level.
Yes.
Oh, there we are. We're bronze community right now.
Right.
So for the League of American Bicyclists level of bicycle-friendly communities, that's correct. But underneath it, you added people for bikes, city ratings. And so on that, there was a correction that needed to be made. It repeated bronze level again. And it's actually a point score, which we scored 28 points.
Right.
And we were the 65th percentile. So I'll email that to Matt.
Yes, Matt and I were discussing that
Okay.
before the meeting, that the goal needs to have a different metric.
Right. And then, I don't know, I have some concepts of what the ultimate goal should be if we're going platinum for the bicycle-friendly city. We should be shooting for an 80 point by 2040
Okay,
on the city ratings.
great.
And
Okay.
like I said, I'll email him all of that.
That'd be perfect. That would help out a lot. Thank
I like
you.
that. Gary, one question. How common is it for a city to be able to achieve that level? Is it a common thing, or is it, you know, can we?
No, it's not. It's the platinum level is I think in the first year of platinum, they had 2 cities or 3 cities that achieved it in the first year that they offered it. They originally only had gold level, then they bumped it up to platinum, and I think only 3 cities achieved it. on people for bikes to achieve an 80. There may be one or two cities that are an 80. Same thing, so that's rare. Scoring a 28, though, we're in the 65th percentile, so we're doing okay, you know, but
It doesn't
there's-
sound okay.
I think we'll be silver soon.
Okay.
I think we'll be silver soon, and I think gold is realistic. Platinum's shooting for the stars.
Yeah, that's why I wondered how many.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if we do everything that's in our goals, we will be platinum.
Well, you know, we do everything right the first time.
The Temecula
so-
way.
Yeah.
Gary, are any of those, Gary, are any of those cities in California?
Davis. Of course. Yeah. Davis, Fort Collins, and I'm going to say Boulder, I think, was the third.
Does anybody drive in Davis, actually?
Not in the town, no.
Uh-huh.
Carl?
This is on the goals.
Okay. Oops.
Okay, I don't know what service D means. I do remember like writing about those service levels a long time ago, but I mean, D, just an outsider, doesn't imply that it's great. I'm just, talking the A to F scale. But anyway, I get it. But my big thing is that, to me, I think it's pretty much agreed that in the survey, the number one concern that people had about Temecula was the traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And are we doing anything to improve the traffic? I mean, I see stable. Stable means it stays the same. So if people are not happy about the traffic, and we're just going to keep them not happy, is that a good goal for 2040?
I think this goal is aspirational because you're not at D for a lot of intersections today.
What are we at now?
I would guess you're at E and F from the
Right, that's what I
comments we're
was thinking
getting.
too.
Yeah.
So should we say
this
that?
is-
Shouldn't we say, I mean,
Well,
I'm just trying, I
it's-
think it's better to be honest in things instead of just saying.
I think the goal is to get to D. That's not saying that's where you are today. So the goal is, this is what the city wants to achieve at all its intersections, and it's not there now, but, so that's the intent. We wrote the language to kind of say what's the condition of traffic that would be desirable, and that is that it's moving and it's not just stopped, which is where you get to E and F levels.
Well, I would take out stable, because that just says you're going to keep it the same.
Yeah, I'm willing to take a look at this one. I think
That's, 'cause
from
that's,
from a transportation engineering standpoint,
Right, it's-
D is good, but no one knows the
Right.
transportation engineering
exactly.
scale.
That's why I was trying to explain what level D
Right.
was.
So
Right.
I think that one we can reevaluate. We can look at something about connecting our existing infrastructure, making
yeah.
those key connections that are still missing. We'll explore that one.
And one of
I
those
have
is
an asterisk.
Caltrans, too.
And the other thing,
Yeah.
I mean, because this is more philosophical, but to me, then the next thing says promote job growth. Well, promoting job growth and also having a moving transportation system, are they
I think the
counter
idea
same thing?
is promoting local job growth to try to limit the out traffic and the congestion on the
Sure.
15.
Yeah, I mean, and it says in Temecula, but you see I'm getting at, because Temecula, I mean, I've been here since the late 80s. It's always been about growth, 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 and especially commercial growth. And when you have one freeway, which there's no getting around, Temecula's, well, I think forever, always just have one freeway. And you always want to, it's just more and more commercial, blah, blah, blah. How are you going to fix the traffic?
Now,
And I-
what-
and I think somehow.
Do you mean the
Okay.
volume of traffic? Or do you mean the way the traffic moves or the timing?
Well, I don't
of
think people
traffic,
care
or-
about the volume as long as it moves. It could be 20 trillion cars here. If it was moving, people would be, hey, it's great. But if there were 3 cars here and it wasn't moving, they'd be ticked off.
Okay,
And
so.
it's never moved since I've been
Can I take
here.
a shot at it? Because I think, Carl, you're addressing it in many of the goals already with complete streets, with, there are a lot of them directed towards flow of traffic, circulation, filling the gaps. We have so many issues with not completing our networks, our car networks, our active transportation networks. But I also wanted to make a point that we may want to add, and I think I've talked about it before. When we do promote more local jobs, Carl, you're right, it's going to give us more volume in town. So what we want to do is create a situation where people can take alternative forms of transportation to their jobs. And the best thing is to go back to with our youth, what our youth said was we want to be in walkable areas. We want to be able to be in areas that are pedestrianized, that we can get to our services, get to our jobs, get to our schools. So there's a philosophy called 15-minute cities, where you can get anywhere in the city in 15 minutes. They've taken it down to even 10 minutes or 10-minute walkable cities. So as we move forward, you have the Uptown project, which really focuses on that type of living. We talked about putting it in the Old Town specific planning with the Altair development. But we also have other areas. I've talked about this before. We have Summers Bend, which has these beautiful trails and complete streets, but yet they don't have services nearby. So those folks are going to buy a house, and they're going to have to drive all the way into Rancho California Road and Margarita to go to the store or up to Murrieta. So when we have these potential areas where we can put services in that people can walk and ride their bikes to, that's going to slow it down a little bit.
The one thing we don't think about, too, is that Temecula intentionally puts the traffic onto the arterials, the collectors, because we live in a cul-de-sac city. So when you want that privacy in your neighborhoods and you don't want outside traffic going by your house constantly every day like they have in Hemet. In Hemet, they're built on a grid system. Every street goes all the way through in both directions, so it spreads the traffic out rather than concentrating it. But we concentrate on purpose because we wanted, back in the time when Temecula was developed and the master plan was created, long before it was a city, the thing that was selling were the tracts, housing tracts with cul-de-sacs. So that's going to push all the cars onto those arterials. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure the roadways are widened and improved, number one, and the turn lanes and everything are appropriate. But also that our signals, we've got the state-of-the-art signal synchronization to keep things moving. I don't mind lots of cars on the road as long as they keep moving. And one thing that we need to say, too, we need to be careful, but Caltrans, first time ever, has seemed to indicate that they are willing to sync their signals on and off and over and under the freeway with our signals. A lot of times cars move until they get close to the freeway, and we don't control that. But now Caltrans seems to be a little bit more willing to do that, and that will help immensely. Also, what's happening on the I-15 with the auxiliary lanes, that's going to help too, and help to prevent that backup. So,
Yeah, I think in the QLMP, we want to keep it high level. We want to talk about diversifying our alternative modes of transportation. And then as we move into the general plan, that's when we'll solve every issue we've ever had regarding traffic.
We do have the goal of increased transportation, coordinating land use and transportation is kind of what you're getting at, Gary. So jobs is one side of it, but the other side of it is having the services and amenities also close. So maybe those two goals need to be combined to create a better picture of what we're trying to achieve, which is reduced vehicle traffic from neighborhoods. Carl, oh, I'm sorry.
And just one other quick thing.
Carl, I promised Kathy that she could jump in here. I'm sorry.
That's what happens when I try to be polite.
No, I'm sorry.
I wanted us to, go back to, we're doing this plan for our future. We're doing this for our young people, for the Temecula they're going to inherit. And I did have the opportunity to participate in the Youth Advisory Council meeting that we had. And one of the areas where the youth really lit up and wanted to start talking and start engaging was when we started to talk about transportation, especially public transit and the bus system. And they all were saying they want to use the bus system. Most of them were saying we want to use it. We don't understand how to use it. We're a little afraid of, we've been told it's dangerous, but there's also no way for me to get to the bus. Many of them were saying that, my parents are now both working, and they were bringing across that message of they need that access to public transit. And we mentioned in here that we want to reduce vehicle trips and focus on moving people, not cars. And I don't see anything in our goals about increasing the use necessarily or the access. We put over here under transit that we want to increase our transit ridership, but we don't really address increasing access, and which will lead to that increased ridership. So I'm just questioning if that should be part of that goal, giving us the how, the what are we going to be doing to increase that ridership? We can't just, hope that they ride. We've got to do something to make it happen.
Should be fleshed out a little more to
And it
really
was
have a
something
path to
specific that
accomplish
those,
it.
yeah, it was something specific that the young people in that session
Right,
talked about.
right, absolutely, okay, very good. Carl?
Just one other quick thing. On the electric vehicle, it says additional, and this is what she's talking about too, like specifics, because I think by 2040, 95% of traffic will probably be electric vehicles. I mean, if not 100%. So additional, I mean, to me, it just seems like needs something more specific, because, yeah, one more would be additional, but I mean, if you think 2040, if every car in Temecula is electric, which it very well may be, then we're going to need a lot. And we should. I mean, it's a good thing. It's wonderful if it
Right,
happens.
I think this is looking more short-term in terms of just trying
Right,
to
but it's
stimulate
2040
demand,
is the idea.
so maybe that could be reworked
Right.
to talk about more of a complete system for supporting electric vehicle transportation. Okay, are we all good with transportation? Great. Healthy and livable community. Support healthy and active lifestyles by promoting recreation programs, parks, trails, and competitive facilities. Be a sustainable community that embraces quality of life through protecting natural environment, maintaining the city's fiscal health, and supporting community health and equity. Be a diverse community that values and supports people of all ages, backgrounds, and religious beliefs. Provide accessible sports, recreational, cultural, health, therapeutic, and community engagement facilities. Enhance Temecula's position as a regional medical center of excellence, offering advanced medical specialties and research facilities and a sufficient ratio of physicians to residents. And again, that's a change from prior, it was based on bed count. Now we're looking at more, physicians to support the population. Value the growth of churches, temples, mosques, and other places of worship. Continue to be a community where local history is remembered and respected, and local culture and artistic creativity is supported. In the goals, in the indicators, this whole first section was absent in the last QLMP, so these are all indicators of actual health in the population. We think is a good source that the county, which is a survey that's done regularly, we hope, called the Strategic Health Alliance Pursuing Equity or SHAPE program. They have a lot more indicators than the ones we picked. We tried to pick ones that have to do with healthy lifestyle as much as we can, because that obviously is something the city can help to support. We did include one for mental health because that was a large part of the discussion with the committee at the last time. So that's the major addition here. The other indicators around the parks, the use of bicycles, we discussed in the last indicator. We did keep in the library and cultural facilities as part of the broader mental health and livability aspect of this core value. We moved the housing into economics, which we'll talk about next, just because it's fundamentally an economic issue, even though it's got obvious mental health and other benefits. So those are the goals and indicators for a healthy and livable city. Any serious heartburn, no pun intended, from any of this, or Darlene?
No, I think you did a nice job. My question would be, we're seeing a huge increase in the suicide rate, and I don't know, I'm not sure what goes under poor mental health, how that's measured by the county, but particularly the youth You know, the amount of individuals we have attempted suicide that are, 11, 12-year-olds in our emergency rooms, it's definitely a significant change and something we would want to see as something we really need to focus on improving. So I'm not sure how to phrase that or
Well,
incorporate
we could
that.
certainly try to add that as an indicator if you feel those records are available enough that we can create an indicator that can be tracked. And so I'll look into that, and maybe we can talk about that. The SHAPE indicators are self-identified. There's survey respondents saying, and they're given some statements to respond to that would indicate whether they have poor mental health, and the same is true for these other indicators. So it's self-reported data, but the advantage is it is survey data from Temecula itself, so we're not relying on
Survey data from
countywide.
adults, though. I mean, the youth are not being asked this question particularly.
That's a good question. There may have been a set of youth indicators as well. I'll go back and look at that. So that's another thing we could, so that and suicide, we'll try to add
Darlene's
something
right,
there if we
and we
can.
are focused on that because we did designate $1 million of our
Right.
COVID funding specifically for mental health issues, so that
Okay.
is a concern.
Okay, great. We'll try to add that. Gary?
Yeah, commend you for including the community service master plan. It's an outstanding master plan, and it was a great survey done right before the pandemic, so it had some good information in it and a lot of great goals in there that we can really work off of. I would say, though, in the goals, and overall, too, just a really great, this is a great section. I do want to just add a possible extra goal would be an active community goal. So a built environment that encourages natural movement, inviting to walk, bicycle, scoot, to work, to services, to recreation, and to school. So kind of to tie in, you've mentioned the trails in it a couple of times, but that would kind of tie in that built environment. It even goes back to what we said about having walkable neighborhoods
Right.
and things like that.
Okay,
So
great.
I will email that in too.
Yeah, that'd be great. So that gets beyond just the recreational aspect of, but sort of more the utilitarian aspect of
Absolutely.
walking and other ways of getting around. Eric?
That goal 3, I like it the way it's written, but I would like to see something added in there in regards to cultures and disabilities.
Okay.
Added to that statement: backgrounds, disabilities, cultures, and religious beliefs.
Okay.
So if we could add that in to just cover it, everybody and be inclusive on that one.
Great.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay. Carl?
I know I brought this up before, and I know some people don't want to hear this, but value the growth of churches, temples, mosques, and other places of worship. And I read a thing just a few days ago. The fastest growing subset of religious beliefs in our country is atheists and agnostics. And among young people, it's like ridiculous. And so is that something that you want to say if you're aiming for 2040, so 20 years from now, that you want more churches? And I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to be, I'm just trying to tell you where people are headed, especially young people. And does Temecula want to say it's promoting the growth when the population's headed the different direction? I'm just throwing it out there.
I think the conversation we had before is that the tremendous sense of community that from that sector that, some people, see that benefit, if no other. Okay.
Just because that's the trend doesn't mean it's right.
he's saying, and I hear what you're saying and all that stuff. But I'm just saying, if Temecula wants to attract tech jobs, those people, they're not, that's where their minds are going. And that's where, if you want to attract those kinds of people who are higher educated and et cetera,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think there are a lot of different aspects to all the goals in this core value that, and many of them speak to that segment of the population that you're talking about in terms of active lifestyles and even the things that Gary was talking about in connected neighborhoods. So that, but there are, additional elements of the community that, this goal speaks to.
I don't know that there's a church in the community that wouldn't like to double its membership. Do you mean more diverse churches, or do you mean more churches?
No.
So that's that's a diversity.
Non-worship.
Or speaking to non-religion, or
Something that says that we're just not trying to attract more churches, because that's not where the young people are headed.
But I think for me, I think the purpose of the document is to continue the quality of life. That's our goal. So yes, it is to accommodate the next generation to continue in the Pechanga way, or the Temecula way, not to just go wherever they want to go. So I have to just say that being religious and being technical are not mutually exclusive.
No, I agree.
Because my son's like at MIT and he's very religious. So I just think that other places of worship is very inclusive. It's not one way. We want to be open. We are open to diverse values, absolutely. But to say that we want to have a non-church or an atheist church, I don't understand.
Yeah, that's what I didn't get.
Well, obviously an atheist church is impossible, but anyway, you know my point.
Can I just say, I commented on this when you brought it up the last time, and I look at this in the context of healthy and livable community goals. It's not necessarily, it's actually really ecumenical and inclusive because it's not calling out a specific faith, but what, to me, it's saying is that those entities provide programs, services, and support that support healthy, livable community goals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I view it. And that's why I also think, by the way, that that it should have nonprofits listed in amongst the faith centers too, because I think they're all valuable contributors to this particular goal. But I don't think it's making a statement about what trends are or anything else. It's just merely saying these types of entities provide services to our community, and we should support their growth because they help the city to be able to do things with counseling and services and homeless programs and things like that. But maybe I'm misunderstanding it.
And just as churches are organic, I mean, churches usually start with a church can start with a very small group of people and grow from there. So are you saying if we don't specifically mention atheism, that we're somehow leaving people out?
Personally, I would just drop it.
Good.
You drop it.
Okay,
No,
but you could add the
drop,
word.
just drop the whole
Add the word and,
point.
add and beliefs.
Oh,
to
that would
worship.
help.
Oh, no, we can't
Places
drop.
of
That would help,
worship
but I
and
would just drop the
beliefs.
whole thing. Personally, I think that would.
Drop the whole bullet point?
No, I
Yes.
thought he meant he was going to drop the whole subject, and that's why I said good.
No, I would drop the bullet point. I'm trying to, I brought this up the first meeting. My biggest concern was the ethnic diversity, and then second was the age diversity of this committee. We don't have people sitting here who are in their 20s. We just don't. And there was, I voiced
Excuse
the
me,
first meeting.
Carl, so we reached out to that demographic
Well, I know you
to try to
did.
get their
Oh, no,
point.
and that's wonderful. But
Yeah.
you get my point. They're not sitting here
Yeah.
right now.
But it didn't come up on their sheet either.
What's that?
It didn't come up on the youth brainstorm that they all thought we have to stop talking about church.
Right, no, I get that, but I'm saying, remember, you're talking Temecula youth, and if the idea is to attract people from outside the area who are going to, the brain drain, so to speak, or the brain gain would be in this case, then how are you going to achieve that? And I think putting something like that in there, they just go, wow.
I don't think churches prevent people from moving here.
So
really don't.
Kathy raised her hand, and then Sandy.
Thank you. So here's what I think, we really need to move on. It's 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
We get it, we've heard it, we'll think about it, we'll figure it out, but we have a lot left, and there are other things like that I want to talk about, and I'm the rabbi, and I want to move on. What does that tell you? Right? So let's
Yeah,
move on.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a factor in attraction,
So,
Kathy, do you have-
given,
nor will it be.
given the time, does anyone need a break? We can take a quick, or should we just keep plowing forward? Let's keep plowing
Yeah,
forward.
I'm ready to
Take a
go.
break if they
Let's
need
go.
it.
Okay. Kathy, did you have any last comment? Okay. We'll move on. Okay, economic prosperity. Provide an entrepreneurial culture that offers a growing number of diverse, high-paying jobs in innovative and global companies, including those in the biomedical cluster. Encourage the broadening of higher education opportunities, both public and private. Foster the expansion of an integrated career technical education system that builds on curricula offered through Temecula High School District, Mount San Jacinto Community College, and the CSU San Marcos Urban Campus. Continue to protect the city's special natural resources, air quality, open space and parklands, wine country, and clean water that provide a special quality of place. Now, these indicators are pretty much what was in the prior plan, except we moved the housing, anything to do with housing out of health into economics, which mainly had to do with the affordability index and the diversity of housing, so the types of housing as opposed to single family. So anyway, any economic goals or indicators that, Tammy?
So since you moved housing into this one, why isn't housing why isn't there a goal for housing? Or at least to examine or encourage the development of, or?
Great question. Somehow there wasn't a goal for housing in the other either. It was always looked at as a support consideration. So certainly that's something that maybe should be considered, given the importance that we've heard about it. So
Yeah, we can add something about diversifying the housing stock, talk about attainable housing, so there may be one or two to add there.
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
there's certainly narrative about it in terms of the importance of having a diverse housing stock in the chapter, but it's not reflected in a goal. It's a good point. Juan Carlos?
I was curious if on the first goal, the reference at the very end, including those in the biomedical cluster. So this is about providing entrepreneurial culture. I'm curious, did we come to a point in the discussion that we were talking specifically about biomedical? Was there a particular reason or if, because I thought it was sort of encompassing of a lot of different industries and not necessarily one sort of leaning towards any one in particular?
This is a holdover from 2010, but we did go back and look at the size of the biomedical cluster, and it's pretty substantial. So we included some narrative in the chapter that explains that how many thousands of jobs in Temecula. So it's not just the hospital and direct medical services. There are a lot of companies that are in medical devices, software, all aspects of the medical industry. So it's an economic development goal of the city, and that's why it's called out. But again, the goal, as you said, is not just that cluster. It's everybody, but in particular, we want to make sure we're not missing the boat with those folks.
Well, I'd only could consider, if we might consider either removing or expanding, only because it seems a little limiting. And if we're thinking about, let's say, like the CTE, it's really, I think, what we're referencing is the center. I don't know if we're just putting that in context of an overall system, but many of the manufacturing companies that are in the city are not necessarily in that vein of biomedical. And so there's so much more that the CTE is really sort of looking to grow and encompass beyond any one
Certainly.
particular sector. So just
Yeah,
wondering
the
if we'd want to.
CTE is not intended to be at all limited by this other goal here. This is just,
I guess what I meant is from the broader context of
Right.
all of these different industries impacted. I don't know if we'd want to either mention more or just remove that particular part.
okay. Well, we'll take
I
a
think we
look at
could
that.
add to it. If you have some language or you want to send something, be
Yeah.
glad to take a look at it.
Great.
I guess the thing is there, aside from tourism, which of course has its own, and the retail, when it just comes to high-paying jobs, what stands out is the biomedical cluster. Everything else is across a wide range of different things, so it's nothing that
Well, I guess
the
also from the
concentration
context of
stands out.
looking for our young workforce to be attracted to not just biomedical jobs, but jobs in so
Yeah.
many other sectors that are
Sure.
important to them.
Right.
From that lens, I guess, is where I was approaching.
Okay, very good. Kathy?
I'm just going to piggyback on that. This was, I noticed in the previous QLMP, we called out the biomedical cluster, and it had me question, why are we just calling out one sector? I do, from my involvement with the Murrieta Chamber of Commerce, I've really seen that Murrieta has really started to build this whole biomedical industry there. And so this does allow us to create a regional biomedical cluster. But I would hate for people to read this and just think that's what we're about in Temecula. For the bio industry,
That's
biomedical
actually,
industry.
since that's a holdover from 2010, that was actually a very strong goal of the city in those days, and it was based on expansion by Abbott and Chemicon and several other companies in town.
Right.
So we've retained those companies for the most part, so.
Maybe that could be phrased as that's just an example of a successful cluster in the city, and then we'd like to develop others. So let's take another look at that. Any other comments on this core value? Eric?
Yeah, so I'm looking at 2 and 3 about higher education and CTE. So how are we measuring how that impacts our community in regards to our high schoolers are going in these programs? What is the impact on our community? Are they getting jobs out of these programs? That's something we can measure. That's something we can show that it's return on investment to our community, and they're coming back and working here. So I think something should be drafted out in the indicators and the goals to see how we can evaluate that based on the 2 goals we have there.
CTE actually, there's a structure on the CTE side for that, and it is actually measured in terms of impact of the community and, students retaining jobs. So we can.
So everything from the number of pathways that are provided
Yeah.
from the school district, the number of students that are involved in those pathways on a year-to-year basis, how many graduate, how many move on, the number of industry partners that are part of the community. So companies in the area offering internships after or for many of these students is part of that process.
And we really need to grow that part.
Absolutely, and that's a very definable number. We can easily chart the number of companies that are offering or part of these programs, not necessarily under any, or however we put that umbrella for CTE, if it's not just manufacturing, the manufacturing sector just completed our internship program. We had 4 Temecula Valley Unified School District students across 3 companies, and it was a wonderful program. We had a lot of great feedback. So to the point that we can measure and put metrics to it, I think there's absolutely a need.
And I think the city can do a better job of encouraging those businesses and manufacturers to participate. There are some things we need to overcome, like the 17-year-olds, and nobody will hire them because they're too young. But it's definitely something we need to look at.
Okay, great. We'll pull some of that data too then and develop some more indicators. Any other comments on this core value? Okay.
Seniors in high school are only 17.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If I'm in the right place, I don't know, to make sure I'm in the right place, I just had a few kind of questions or things to consider. Representing the travel industry, one of the things that we've talked about is becoming a resort community. Now, it is a residential, but is there a way, or should we consider tracking full-time residents and part-time residents? Is there a way to do that for people that are renting out their homes, that are coming in, seasonality, which we're seeing a lot of our other neighboring destinations do that, where 50,000 people are here today, but it goes to 80,000 come peak seasons. And so that's something I would think to consider as you start seeing the travel and tourism continue to grow. What may be something you want to consider. If it's not in the first 5 years, it would be something you definitely would want to track before 2040 to see if that's changing at all. And then I think I had talked to Matt a little bit about, we have lots of ways to track. I know using hotel occupancy is one, but it doesn't tell you the number of visitors that are actually, again, impacting your destination. And so we've talked about that because we definitely want to manage growth. It's about bringing in the right consumer because we're looking at up to 70,000 people staying in our hotels monthly. So that increases in your population and also visitation. So that's another one is visitation. But the other one is an indicator which we can tell which impacts consumer spend when they come here, visitor spend, so we can tell the trends of the industries that are actually outperforming. So we talked about restaurants, small non-chain restaurants and the growth in restaurants, growth in retail. And I know you see it in the other from the economic development side, but from a travel spend, those would be other things, like how much money the traveler's spending.
Right.
So there's a variety of ones. I would just suggest maybe put a few more in there, and I can give you like a tool of just ones you can pick off.
All right.
But I do think looking at the resort community to see how many people are actually coming in seasonal, because I think that we are seeing that impact.
Sure. If you have got some data that you can share, then we can develop something.
I think that's a very good point. We're the perfect long weekend destination.
Right.
The wineries, Pachanga, Old Town. So our population, we talked about this with executive staff. We did interviews and we talked to Chief Hall. He talked about Temecula has a population. It's one thing from Monday to Wednesday. Thursday to Sunday, it changes drastically. So I think we need to get a better handle on that in terms of housing, how many rentals we have, what it does to our traffic, and a lot of that. So
And then
we'll
residents that
explore.
actually lived here at one time full-time, but they're living in other parts and coming back here during the, prime seasons for them to be in Temecula.
And half of our sales tax generated comes from tourism.
Yeah. The other thing is
people from outside.
with regard to the indicators, we're going to try to incorporate the best data we have into the document. But then when this is done, we're going to update the general plan, and then we're going to have a dashboard of indicators online associated with the general plan. And as better data becomes available, we'll incorporate that, and we'll continue to track, these goals and these indicators based on better data. So it might not be in the document at the time of adoption, but it will evolve.
Might we consider, say, total dollars spent by the companies in Temecula or the number of jobs that are geared toward those 20 to 29-year-olds that we're looking to, as far as information to track over time? Would we want to consider having additional, and I don't know if that would be part of this dashboard that gets sort of blown out over time or added to over time, but would we want to see that growth over time in all these companies that are just gaining momentum and adding more to the community?
Yeah, the prior QLMP had a section in each core value for potential future indicators in addition to the ones that actually got quantified. And I'm beginning to think that maybe we need something along those lines because a lot of that is going to evolve. I mean, all of these things that we've just been talking about are part of what I would view as a more detailed economic development strategy. And there are metrics for those things. But the other thing I would mention is that the targets for those things change because the markets change, and so they tend to be something that the city needs to be more flexible about monitoring, but then being prepared to switch gears to something else that is going to better respond to the ultimate goal, which might be, as you said, hiring younger people. I mean, what those industries are going to be 5 years from now are probably different than what we think they are today. So somewhere along the line, we have to recognize the need for that future flexibility. And as I think Matt said, we're kind of showing what we've got today, but we need to point the path to, and I know the City Economic Development Department is really tracking a lot of this stuff too. So we'll think about how to present that the best way. But having the digital dashboard is a tremendous resource because that, we're not having to go through a process and reprint a document. We can update that and shoot it out to the website, and there it is. So it can be very quick and more real time. Great. Okay. Anything else on this core value, and we'll move on. Oops. Okay. Sustainable and resilient city goals. Be the most sustainable in Southern California, one that uses resources effectively and efficiently, protects the city residents and environment, develops more diverse, green, and competitive economy, and improves livability and quality of life for all its residents. Ensures safe and sufficient water supplies for the 21st century through conservation, infrastructure improvement, and protection of floodplains. Maintain the city's high level of air quality. Develop community resiliency in infrastructure, the economy, around natural resources, and hazard mitigation. Adopt a climate action plan as part of the general plan update and environmental impact review process. Now, in terms of the indicators, we did add the air quality indicator, which wasn't in the prior plan, even though there was always a goal to have the best air quality possible. But obviously, AQMD tracks this, so we've pulled that data into this. Most of these other indicators are from the prior plan, but we've updated the data. So I'll open again to any comments or questions. Terry?
Am I on? Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm really grateful that you guys added the term resiliency to the title of this core value. That's really important. And also that you're emphasizing resiliency in your general plan. And also that you didn't shy away from saying the words climate change, because that's a real thing and it's going to affect us. In terms of looking at the indicators, I mean, you've had a number of my comments already, but what I didn't say was that under the indicators, we talked about how there's a lot of different ones. And tying it to the climate action plan that's pending was probably the best way to deal with that in the dashboard. But maybe we should have an additional section under the indicators that talk about the plans, because you're talking about a master drainage plan, a stormwater plan, the integrated watershed management plan, and those are all getting us closer to that goal. So I think that might help with this section.
We did try to list those as strategic priorities in the sense of projects the city's doing, so planning projects to, so I think that's how we handled that idea that we've got plans coming that are going to give us metrics in the future that then hopefully later could be quantified in the dashboard.
Okay.
But I understand what you're saying. There's more to this topic than what's reflected here.
Right.
Okay. Sandy?
So the goal, be more sustainable city, most sustainable city in Southern California, using local resources, on and on and on. And then the page
Sandy,
before,
is your mic on?
I hope so.
It's just sounding like.
I need to move it. Hello, better?
There,
Okay.
thank you.
Forget what I said. On my page 48, this is the community service response. Resident importance to provide reliable garbage and recycling services in 88.7. I don't believe it, because I peek on trash day, see how the recycling's looking. I ask my friends, who puts their kitchen waste in the bucket and puts it in the green bin on their night? Me. Me. I don't know anybody else who does it. None of my friends who live in Temecula do it. Do you? I don't know. That seems so immensely simple and critical, and it's not talked about. I don't know how you word it. I don't know how you make it clear that it's an important, it should be an indicator. People are recycling, taking out their food scraps and not putting them in the regular trash that sits in the landfill or down the garbage disposal when it can be used to make fertilizer or other helpful, useful things.
Doesn't CR&R keep track
And I
of that
brought this
stuff?
up last time. I know nobody much cares about it but me, but I am vigilant and diligent. I have 2 bags every week to put in my green bins. You care, she cares. Oh,
But I think we can know that
Yeah, so
with CR&R.
we're
Yeah.
definitely headed in that direction.
Yeah.
So I can't remember the name of the Senate bill, but there's mandatory organic recycling that's being
Yep.
implemented. CR&R, our waste haul provider,
the
has
best.
an
Oh,
anaerobic
they're really
digester.
good.
yeah.
So it's certainly it's required now for commercial recycling of organics, and residential is being implemented as well.
But the thing is, it will in time be required of the homes, yeah. How do we make it happen, though? A lot of things are required, and people there's no impetus, because it's a pain in the neck.
So there's a group, it's Cal Recycle. CR&R will have to answer to Cal Recycle, and part of the way they do that is through audits. So there will be people dumping the trash out and taking a look at the,
They do spot checks.
yeah.
I do spot checks. It's my community service.
Okay, Kathy?
No, I just was going to say about what Rabbi Sandy was saying is, we are at a point where CR&R were mandated, and if we don't, we could get fined. So maybe considering it's mandatory we start doing this, and it could lead to fines, maybe it is something where
Right.
we should be making an indicator for it to.
Right. We had it's listed, I believe it's 1383, SB 1383, that is, so it's in the strategic priorities as a project for the city to implement and comply with, but there's no reason there couldn't be a goal around that, because obviously it's a big enough issue that the state has taken notice, so we could try to craft a goal initially, and then as more data becomes available, there could be an indicator to track progress on it. Carl?
Just to piggyback on what she said, if you can go back to the goals, the most sustainable city in Southern California. I mean, I think that's a wonderful goal. And if Temecula wants to make itself stand out, that could be something that you could get into promoting, stuff like that. But I think the thing is, you're going to have to come up with ways to do that, which I don't see here. And so I'm thinking you mentioned the composting, that's obvious. But once again, the city could start promoting it, big time. You could do the thing about electric vehicles, solar panels, recycling. I can go on and on. But if the goal really is to be the most sustainable city in Southern California, which I think is a great goal, and I think if you want to, part of the toolkit of attracting younger people, if you're a community that can market itself as we want to be sustainable, and use the word global warming if you want, because that's what they use, and stuff like that, I mean, that would get people's attention. And especially people who are in their 20s, who are educated, they go, wow, I want to be in a town like that, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So I'm just saying that's a great goal. I think we just need to do more specifics about how do we achieve it, and then really make it a goal, not just a platitude. And the only other thing is to maintain the city's high level of air quality. Well, in the next page, it says that the ozone needs improvement. Well, how can you say that's a high level? So I would just drop that, because, I mean, do we really have a high level of air quality when you're saying the ozone needs improvement?
I think the idea is that it's better than some of your surrounding areas. But again, the goals are aspirational. But maybe it could be reworded not to imply that we're there yet. So that's probably what we need to try to do. Tammy?
Just really quick, from what I recall in the subcommittee that we had that night, we talked about adding education as part of the, like public education as part of a city goal, to disseminate information and encourage others to do the things that Rabbi Sandy is suggesting and others.
Okay. That's another great idea that actually could tie together a lot of these comments of, you know, and there's text to that effect in the chapter about the importance of education and communication, but we could try to see if maybe there's a goal statement that could reflect all of that, because that kind of goes a long way to moving the whole program forward. Eric?
Yeah, I'll be quick. And as a subset of our community, particularly those who live on the backside of Old Town, air quality, I think you guys briefed already, Commissioner, air quality is kind of not good in that
Not good
area
there.
compared to the other parts of the city.
Right.
Additionally, you know, the noise pollution, noise abatement for that community as well. Is that being addressed elsewhere? Because I know that's a problem from the citizens. They always bring that up. Is that something we're looking at to make sure we're mitigating and put things in place to try to decrease some of that?
That's definitely part of the general plan, the noise. It's part of the, I don't know if there's a noise element, but there's part of, yeah. So, yeah. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Accountable and responsive city government. Provide consistently professional services and information to customers and constituents. Promote innovation and adopt technology that enhances access to information and data. Maintain a flexible organization which responds to the changing needs and priorities of the community. Provide the highest quality of service at the most cost-effective rate. Ensure transparency in all aspects of city government. So again, the indicators here update all the data. There's also more emphasis on the participatory part of government. So the lower section there, citizen communication and involvement. The voter turnout is standard, but the participation in boards and commissions, the number of public outreach messages. When we get into the equity core value, there's a lot more about communication and outreach, but for this one, we took the broader measure that the city tracks in terms of overall number of public outreach messages. So, any comments, David?
Yeah, just a quick one. We talked about staffing levels earlier for public safety. I think it's generally agreed that our residents like a higher ratio there. Just want to make sure that we're not running in the opposite direction with this one. I would think of a higher staffing ratio in the city as a good thing too, because they're providing services, and we are asking our city to build a lot of projects for us in this document. I don't want to set an expectation there that is counterproductive to what we're asking for in this plan.
So what we've done with these indicators, the first one, cost per capita, then number of full-time staff, is we've reported the data without setting a goal, because that's a big topic at city government, and obviously it's addressed every year in the budget development process, but it's an even bigger, longer-term issue that needs definition, and it's what gets back to what I was saying earlier about wanting a high quality of service and recognizing that, as you said, more staff is probably needed to provide that. So in this case, we've treated these indicators as just tracking what the city is doing, and it's a much more complex discussion about where you draw the trade-offs there. Any other comments on this one? Okay, and then last one, equity. Support the fair and equitable treatment of all human beings in a just society, foster a healthy environment and prosperous opportunities for all residents of Temecula, and advance equity, diversity, engagement, and inclusion in the city's services, programs, cultural experiences, and community dialogue, including access to language. exhaust all methods of communication and outreach between the city and its residents when providing services and programs to ensure transparency and inclusion among all segments of society. Monitor the city budget and resource allocation to close inequity gaps to ensure that the city programs, services, educational pathways, and infrastructure meet the needs of diverse communities. So the first set of indicators are kind of quantitative things that we reviewed that come either from the state Cal Enviro screen or from the more recent information that the city developed through its housing element program. So they're actual quantitative indexes. Most of the bottom part of this have to do with getting people involved in government, either in terms of active volunteers, number of students and youth in government, services through the library, a number of nonprofit organizations that the city supports and interacts with, and then at the bottom, number of affordable housing. So here's a case where we did list a housing indicator in a different equity, in a different core value for equity. But again, the communication is the main theme. So number of followers on various social media, the number of social media posts, number of digital media communications, and updates to the Temecula Outreach Channel 3 and other YouTube and other things like that. And then finally, resource allocation, number of programs for special needs folks, and the actual number of participants, so the programs, then the participants, human service programs for at-risk youth, computer classes through the library, and the homeless outreach and tracking and services. So a lot of indicators there. Any comments on goals? Or let's start with Kathy.
Yeah. I wanted to go to the goals for the Youth in Government program.
I'm sorry, for the other core value?
The indicator, yes. Are we not there yet?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what, maybe I didn't hear what you said.
There's an indicator for youth in government.
Yes.
I'm sorry, okay.
Yes.
Number of students and youth in government, goal 21, and then so forth.
Yeah, we have the goal listed at 21, and that just seems really low. That's only allowing 7 students per each public high school, and not really taking into consideration any of our students that are in homeschool programs or our charter schools.
Okay.
I know that, I've heard it discussed before that we're at a point in time where we're starting to see a lack of people going into the public servant sector. And this looks like a really good opportunity that we could be introducing our youth to it. I'll just piggyback my experience when I was a student in Anaheim in high school. Some of the events that I still remember are the Youth in Government days. It's what really got me to be engaged civically, and
right.
I'd like to see us increase that.
We're actually expanding Youth in Government now. It has been in the past a one-day program, and now we're expanding it to 2.
Okay.
And it does take 100% of every staff, every department's time over those 2 days, because the students are actually doing the work, and they actually produce the staff reports for the mock city council meeting that they have on the last day. So, and there are other ways that we can involve our youth too. I mean, we can regularly go out to the high schools and speak to them. And I always go to the AP government classes and the government classes at the high school. So for youth in government, there are many ways other than just that program that we can impact those leaders and encourage them to, consider civic jobs or public service jobs.
Maybe including something to where that we're making sure that the programs are being delivered out to the homeschool and the charter school
Right.
community.
Okay.
That we're not just reaching out to our public school.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we'll make sure to expand that. Very good. Darlene?
I just have a concern about the poverty not being included anywhere in an indicator. I mean, there's a lot of even basic access to utilities, where we can't discharge someone from the hospital with oxygen because they don't have electricity or they don't have running water. I know we saw it during the pandemic where, people couldn't be homeschooled because they didn't have access to computers. So I think somehow addressing the poverty indicator.
There are data for that in the census, so we could definitely add an indicator for that. Very good, thank you. Carl?
This kind of follows up on what she said, and you've got it right there at the bottom of the screen. It says number of affordable housing units constructed, and it says 0. And I'm just curious, why it's
So the
0?
city just adopted a new housing element. It has goals for numbers of units. As of this moment, there are a number of units in planning stages, not yet on the ground. So we decided to be real and say, as of this moment, there are none that have been constructed in this cycle. Doesn't mean they aren't in planning, and so that's
We
where
could
ended up with
include
that.
a footnote to that effect.
We could certainly
Yeah.
footnote that to explain.
Because we have, we have affordable housing. Okay.
Okay.
4,000 units.
Tammy?
We've got a lot.
I like what Darlene said about
4,000
poverty.
More than 4,000.
When I was looking at the goals on goal number 4, and this is more of a question than a comment, does this, I want to make sure that we're being mindful of low-income families and how they're able to access city programs and those kind of things. So is that saying that? I wasn't clear. Because if not, maybe you just need to add the word to ensure accessibility.
I mean, that was the intent.
Yeah, I was
Okay,
going to say.
That was certainly the intent.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Thank you.
Lene?
I like that, the first sentence under equity, that we support the fair and equitable treatment of all human beings in a just society. I think we need somewhere in there that even though we support that, we can't guarantee equal outcome. Because I think sometimes people think of equity as everybody gets the same thing. And so that's the one thing that bothers me about the word equity, is that I think we need to qualify that we can't guarantee equal outcome.
Okay. Any other comment?
Just a little background on the equity core value. We worked with the Ready Commission, I think it was 2 or 3 meetings on this specific element, or this core value, which is how we arrived at this. So when we present to the different commissions, if anything changes here, we'll present that in detail back to the Ready Commission. And the same goes with all the other commissions. We're going to go to Planning, Ready Commission, Community Services, and Public Traffic Safety. So we're going to take this information tonight. There will be modifications to the document. We're going to try to summarize those and present them at those commission meetings.
Just as an explanation, the Ready Commission's task is to ensure that city program policies, every aspect of city governance does not prevent people from feeling welcomed or does not prevent people from participating. We want to make sure that everyone feels like they're welcome, that they're included, and that no program or activity or event that we do intentionally tries to exclude anyone. So that's one thing that they do, is they review really everything the city's doing to make sure that everybody is treated equally, and feels welcome to participate.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions on this one? Great. Well, we got through it all. I really appreciate your persistence tonight. We did want to leave open just if there are any other, we didn't necessarily cover everything that's in the document. There's an opening chapter that has other stuff. Are there any other overall comments anyone wants to make about it? We're obviously going to go back now and add a lot of new stuff and rewrite and come out with a new version of this later this summer before it starts going to the other boards. So any other input you have. And again, if you think of anything after tonight, by all means, email Matt or call him up, whatever works best. And so we have basically another week here that we'd like to get your input, whatever it might be, after tonight. And then we'll get to work on the new version.
If by chance we haven't done the very best we could the first time in this effort, nothing is set in stone in Temecula like this. We can always make improvements and review and revisit. And we know that coming out of this process, it's been a lengthy process and there's so many things to cover. So we think broadly, we work locally, and we really appreciate all the input that everyone has had. And I think we've come up with a really solid quality of life master plan. So thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thanks to everyone on the committee.
Yes, yeah.
So I'll just ask, do we have any public comments? Skylar? Oh, I saw your hands move. Don't touch your nose. Okay, then in that case, again, thank you very, very, very much
Thank you.
for participating.